Morning everybody, how you doing today? On this episode of the show, we're going to talk about the latest news that Facebook has humans reviewing your audio messages in Messenger. Now, I had a great talk this morning on my CBC radio column about this very issue because it's raising a lot of concerns and there's a lot of misconceptions around what's actually happening, why it's happening, and what you should be concerned about. Now, here's the reality of what's happening. Facebook was the latest to announce that they had humans reviewing audio transcripts from Messenger. So if you send an audio file back and forth, there is a chance that a human is going to review that at some point. Now, no word on whether they're transcribing voice calls made over Messenger, but it's probably likely as well. Now, that's disconcerting to a lot of people. You figure when you're sending a message back and forth in Messenger that it's private. It's not really the case, and we're going to dive into that. Now, this follows a series of announcements from Amazon, from Microsoft, from Google, and from Apple, saying that they were doing the same thing for their voice assistants. Now, that's a different case, and I'll tell you why. So with the voice assistants, you use a trigger word. You say, hey Siri, Alexa, okay Google, and I know, like anybody else, I have no idea what Cortana's trigger word is because who uses Cortana? But at least there's an explicit interaction. I am requesting that the device listen to my next few words. Now, there's a privacy issue there around accidental triggering, and that's a problem. But those are a percentage of those voice commands are sent for review to look for accuracy, to see if they're actually being interpreted correctly. And you can actually look at that up in Amazon Alexa's app. You can go to your activity and you'll look and it'll say Alexa heard, and then you can say, was this right? Yes or no, right? And that makes sense. That's an explicit interaction of me saying, hey, hey Siri, what's the next game for the WNBA? And it will tell me the response. But there's an interaction there that's expected, I think, on both sides, and that's okay. Where Facebook really crossed the line here is in these audio messages. So if I'm messaging with you on Facebook Messenger and I send you an audio message, there's a chance that that could be transcribed. Similarly with Microsoft and Skype translations, those were being sent for accuracy. Now, from a technical perspective, I totally understand why this is happening. This is happening because they want to verify the accuracy of the machine transcription. So they have a machine learning model that takes the text and creates, or takes audio and creates text from it. I do that with a show manually through either GCP or through AWS, and I send an audio file and I get the text back. Now, Facebook is doing the same thing in the background on Messenger, and that should shock nobody. They're looking for behavioral signals so they can better target business services and advertisements towards you. But the challenge is direct messages, people just assume they're private, even though they're not. Now, there are some exceptions. WhatsApp, which is under Facebook, but is still end-to-end encrypted for now. And iMessage, when you're talking to another iMessage user, is also end-to-end encrypted. And that's an interesting contrast, because iMessage is obviously Apple's big foray into messaging, and the goal for iMessage is to sell more devices, to lock people in. I read an interesting article last week where teens were kicking non-iMessage users out of iMessage chats because they didn't like the color change that comes with an SMS user. And that has an ancillary privacy and security benefit, is that chat goes back to being end-to-end encrypted amongst the group participants. And WhatsApp is still end-to-end encrypted by default for everything on the platform, which is great. But we'll see what happens when Facebook migrates everything to their unified chat, because they've said they're going to do that, combine Facebook Messenger, Instagram messaging, and WhatsApp together. And while Facebook Messenger technically supports end-to-end encryption, nobody I've ever asked actually knows that or knows how to enable it under the secret conversation mode. And that's what's really important here is defaults. It needs to be default end-to-end encrypted, but also the expectation. And that's the key issue here, is that the expectation for an interaction with a voice assistant is that the computer is listening to your voice. That's how it works. And the fact that somebody might manually review that to improve the model isn't as jarring or shocking. There's still some concerns, but it's not jarring or shocking. For Messenger and any other direct messaging thing, people assume these are private. They are not. They are private message between you, your intended recipient, and the company that's hosting them. Never forget that, and people do. So when Facebook was revealed that they were doing this, it was extremely jarring. Even though it was covered under the privacy policy and the terms of service, it was in such broad and flowery language, essentially saying that any content or use of the services may be monitored by ourselves or a third party, blah, blah, blah. They were legally covered. They didn't do anything legally wrong here, and technically you have agreed to this by agreeing to the terms and service. But we all know that doesn't really count for anything, and I think that's key takeaway from today's episode. episode is, what's the user expectation? For direct messages, the expectation is that they're private, they're not mined, they're not monitored, they're not transcribed, and they're actually secure. That's far from the truth on most platforms, but for voice assistants, it's a little more liberal because you are actually talking to the system. You are having this voice transaction. You're expecting some sort of transcription so that the system can interpret your response. The fact that a human was reviewing it, still a little bit jarring, but not nearly as much as the messaging case. Let me know what you think. Hit me up online at MarkNCA in the comments down below, and as always by email, me at markn.ca. Have a fantastic day. We'll talk to you on the next episode of the show.